Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we come to this last class, as we study the feast that Jesus celebrated, we ask that you open our hearts and minds that it might be effective, the word might be effective for our lives today. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
May I take a moment?
Now remember, the Feast of Purim is not one of the feasts that God commanded.
Right.
But it was, and we'll see in the book, the people commanded it. Okay? So today, some of the Jewish people will celebrate it, some will not. Especially Orthodox Jews say, no, it's really not something that is biblical, so we're not going to do it. We read through about half of the book, and I think we're on chapter 4. Is that correct?
Correct.
Everybody?
That's right.
Okay. And let's do a little background material so we all remember where we are, okay? So there's this King Xerxes, and Xerxes was very powerful, he was very wicked, and he controlled 127 provinces of the area, basically almost the whole known world at his time, except for down into Egypt. But almost everything was under his control. And he has this 6-month meeting with his advisors from 127 different provinces, and at the end he throws a 7-day feast, and they're drinking and they've had way too much, and he invites his queen to come and be presented before the noblemen, Queen Vashti, and she refuses because he asked her to show up with only her crown on. Okay? And she won't do that. She's throwing a feast for the noble women. Okay? She refuses, so he's angry. So he goes to his noblemen and say, what should I do about this? And they say, if you let it go, then all the women in our territory are going to say, well, Queen Vashti did it, I can do it too, I don't have to listen to you. So he deposes her as queen, and then shortly after he's depressed, so his noblemen say, why don't we go and find all the virgins in our 127 provinces, and we'll prepare the best, and you can pick from all of these women your new queen. And he picks a new queen named Esther. Esther was raised by her uncle Mordecai. Mordecai is a Jew and raised Esther as a Jew, but because they're in a foreign land, they don't proclaim their Jewish heritage. And there is second in command to Queen Xerxes is Haman. And Haman is angry with Esther's uncle Mordecai because he won't bow down to him because he's a Jew and honor him, because that would be honoring a false god. So, yeah.
Is this the same Persian leader that, not Nathaniel?
No. Yeah, this is the leader right after. Yes.
It's the next one.
It's the next one.
Okay.
I think what you're thinking of is Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar goes in, and he's the one who finally takes over the southern kingdom of Israel.
All right.
And he deposes the best of Israel. He takes them back. And that's where you get Daniel in the lion's den, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace.
And what, Nehemiah goes there, then comes back and...
Nehemiah is one of the ones that is taken. Nehemiah, finally they allow them to come back to the country, and Nehemiah comes back and works on reestablishing the temple again and the holy city of Jerusalem.
So it's a similar tranche of history here.
Yes, this whole time of history, yeah. And one of the things I share, because I think it's important, is Daniel interprets one of King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and becomes a favor and actually becomes in command of the city of Babylon, okay? And he's in charge of all of the wise men. Okay, Daniel is. So Daniel, this Jew, is over the wise men, and he has so much to do, he can't do it all, so he divides up the territory with his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay? And people always ask, well, how did the wise men come because of Jesus? Well, hundreds of years before, Daniel is telling them these prophecies that are going to be fulfilled. Okay? So,
ties together.
yeah. And that's why I think it's exciting to study the Old Testament, because you can see that it's all interwoven, that God had this plan and it all came about. And it all came about in Jesus. He fulfilled all of these. And John makes a big point of all of the festivals Jesus fulfills in some way or another. So when they have the festival, the harvest festival, and they're pouring the water, and they say God is the living water, and Jesus stands up and says, I am the living water. I am Yahweh, God. So he claims to be God, the living water. Claims to be the bread. He claims to do that. Now, we know that he was at this feast. This feast was probably even minor at the time of Jesus, and he doesn't really say anything other than we know that he goes. And I want to say that's in John. Let me look that up real fast. I think I have that quote. John 5:1. If you look at John 5:1, and there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Piecing together the time period, this would have been the Feast of Purim. Okay, because then later on, let's see, I have that too. John 10, he goes up to the festival of the dedication of Jerusalem. That would be Hanukkah. Okay, so we know that Jesus is going to all of these feasts and proclaiming himself, the one in each of the feasts. Okay, so let me see, where was I? So Mordecai won't bow down to Haman. Haman gets angry. He tricks King Xerxes in one of his drunken stupors to sign a decree that the Jews, because they won't listen to their laws, that on a certain date, any person could kill a Jew without any punishment or backlash. Okay, so they're free to do that. And they can plunder the Jewish property at that point. Okay? The reason it's called... One day. Only one day. The reason it's called Purim is because Haman calls in the wise men and asks them to cast lots. And they pick the day, the month, the day, and the time. Okay? And Purim means lots, or the casting of lots.
Is that a yearly thing or just one time?
It was just going to be one time. Okay? And I can't tell you anything more than that because we're going to get into the rest of the story. Okay, so you who were here last week, I got it? Okay. And do you feel you caught up?
Yep.
Okay, so chapter 4. Okay. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done. Oh, wait a minute. One more important thing I forgot to tell you. Mordecai, before this, found out about a plot to kill the king. And he tells Esther, who tells the king, and the king is saved because of that. And some of his palace guards are put to death. Okay? And that's going to play into the story here in a minute. This is like a soap opera. It really is. I also shared last week, and I want to make this very clear, is Esther never mentions the name God. But when you look at the Hebrew text, right in the middle, an acrostic spells out Yahweh. Okay? So, right in the middle is God, but you don't always see him in the middle. You don't see him in this. Okay? He isn't outspoken, but he's there. Alright. So, chapter 4. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes. He's talking about the edict to eliminate the Jews. And put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. The king wants his palace to be a happy place. This is Disneyland. I don't want any sadness in Disneyland. Okay? You're going to cry, you have to leave Disneyland. Don't you tell your kids that?
Yeah.
Okay. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes, which were signs of great mourning. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. She doesn't know why he's mourning. She hasn't found out about the edict yet. So she thinks she's doing a good thing for her uncle. Hey, uncle, get over this. Here's some nice clothes and everything. Now, one of the things we also talked about last week is why eunuchs. And I always thought that was because most of the time they're in harems of women, and they didn't want them to have relationships with them. But actually, the kings also had eunuchs. And the reason was, medically, when they castrate a male early on, he grows much larger, muscular, taller. Okay. I also heard this week that they live longer. Okay, medically. Okay, so historically, these were the bodyguards. Okay, do you know that? Can you say that from your medical training?
For me?
No.
I'm a lawyer.
Okay. I don't know why. I thought all of a sudden I thought you were a doctor.
She's who you go to if it don't come true.
Yeah. Okay. This surgery didn't work. I'm going to come see you, okay? No wonder you're looking at me like, what are you talking about? Okay. Well, yeah,
I think you
I
got
can
a
Google it.
farmer.
I knew that you were a lawyer.
I can Google it.
Is that why they castrate bulls? I don't know. It might be because they grow larger. It might also be because they're gentler.
Yeah, I thought they did it because they were not as aggressive.
Aggressive.
Not aggressive.
Yeah.
Why don't I just Google it?
Yeah, okay. Okay. So then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, and here we see the king had him also, assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. And I left that out of the story. There's a lot more to this story. When Haman goes to the king and he's tricking him, he says, "Oh, King Xerxes, you're not even going to have to pay for it. I'll pay for the destruction of the Jews." And King Xerxes said, "Oh, you're such a royal citizen. I'm not going to make you pay for it." Okay? So there's all this deceit and intrigue going on here. Makes for a great story. All right? Let's see. 8. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa. Susa is the city that King Xerxes and Esther is living in. Okay? This is not, King Xerxes moves his territory to Susa. It was originally Nebuchadnezzar's summer palace. Okay? To show to Esther and explain to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he must be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the golden scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I have been called to go to the king." So he has this huge harem, and he's using the women, and she says, "I don't know when the next time I'm going to get to go to the king to tell him about this, okay, and if I go in without being summoned, it possibly my death. Okay? When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape.
Yeah.
Be careful, because you might be part of that annihilation. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And I think this is probably one of the most significant verses of Esther for me. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. Who knows that this isn't what God wants you to do? That you're in this position right now for this. I think we need to ask ourselves that all the time. You know? Is this the time that God has chosen for me? Then Esther sent his reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat and drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. But notice what she says. I think this is so significant. You know, how do we know it's a time for this? She spends 3 days in fasting and prayer. And she asks everybody around her, please pray with me. Please fast with me. Let's take this back to God. Okay? So it isn't a willy-nilly type of thing. It's on purpose she's doing this. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Now, even though it doesn't say God, we're assuming all of that in this. This is why they're doing it. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. So, I don't think, in fact, I'm pretty sure that Susa is just ruins at this point. But I have seen some other European areas where they had this, and it was kind of like the one that I'm thinking of. It was a big courtyard in the middle, and then the king's quarters were all on this side, and all of his harem was on this side, and then officials and offices were across the back. So, you could walk around in all of this area, and if the king was out and he saw you, that wasn't the problem. This is going into his inner
Sanctum thing.
sanctum. That's a
Like
good
they say
word.
in
Yeah,
Superman.
yeah. He's going into the inner sanctum of the king. Okay, and that's what's prohibited, because the king said, "I don't want to be disturbed. I don't want this. Only when I call for you, you're going to come." Okay. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So by doing that, he's allowing her to come into his presence, so she's not going to die. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" Well, why would he know that she wants something? Well,
She was there.
she was there. That's exactly it.
Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have been up there.
That's right. That's right. He wasn't summoning her. Okay, so there had to be some reason. Why are you here? Okay, even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you.
He must be fond of her too.
He's very fond of her. Yes. He's also very fond of drink. Okay? And we don't know exactly what state he's in right now. Okay? He makes some very foolish choices. Okay? And we know historically some of this is very accurate. He was a king that just dwelt on lavish living. It's really surprising he wasn't killed or overtaken. And I explained last time, these 127 provinces, what they did basically was, you give me loyalty, you pay taxes to me, and I'll kind of let you rule, and I use this, and this is not a great, especially in front of a lawyer, a great example, but it's kind of like national rights and states' rights, okay? So he had national laws they had to follow, but if they were in line with his national laws, they could have their own state or province laws, you know? And we see that even up to the time of Jesus, because remember, the Jews have the ability to punish Jesus by having him flogged, but they want to put him to death, and they can't do that. That's why they take him to Pontius Pilate. So they had rights up to that point, and then they had to get the Roman government to approve it, to go further. So this was not unheard of, even hundreds of years later. Okay. And also, you know, when I read that, I wonder if some of this isn't hyperbole. I'll give you half my kingdom.
Yeah.
You know, would he really do that?
No.
Because once he dies, it goes to she couldn't have any property in her name. That would not, you know, there was no turnover of property or anything. So, okay. But look at how she answers. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. So she's gonna have a nice banquet, sit him down, and explain to him exactly what Haman did, how he tricked him. Okay? Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. Oh, I like this. Oh, we're gonna have a party. Yay! You know? So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, you see the wine there? Okay, you know, let's get him a little inebriated. Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.
That is almost word for word.
Yeah, what he said before. Yeah. And Esther replied, my petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Now, I often struggle with this. Why didn't she just tell him the first time? Esther knew something. It wasn't the right time.
Just didn't feel right.
How did she know that? I don't know. I don't know, but it just wasn't right. So she asked him for another time, and it works out the second time. Okay? Or was it just because she was scared? You know? But look at how she phrases it. If it's okay with you, King, you know?
Yeah.
You know, she's
I think she just is buttering up.
I think she's buttering.
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, she's just working the deal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It could be. It could be.
If you know and you've been around him, you probably know how to work it.
Yeah, you do. You do. You know, hey, how about a party tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good, you know.
That's all you wanted?
Yeah, you know, that's nothing.
I'll bring the wine.
Yeah. What, red or white, you know. Another part of the story that you might find interesting was when he invited all the nobles, you know, there was the king's wine, which was supposed to be the best. Okay, he said every nobleman for the 127 provinces could bring their own wine, whatever they liked. You know, you didn't usually do that in the king's presence, okay, because it was offensive. You know, you think your wine is better than my wine, okay? And let me tell you, after spending 3 months in Germany, it's not wine in Germany.
Beer.
It's beer.
Beer. Yeah, you know, you.
Though,
But the ice wine is very good.
When the first time we toured, our tour director said, if you go into a restaurant, just say, I want the local beer, okay? And they each have their own favorites, okay? But one time when we were living there, I made the mistake of saying, well, what beer is the best? And he looked at me and said, our beer is the best. And it was in, wasn't in Coburg, it was in Cologne. You know, where the big cathedral is, Cologne. Yeah, and they serve it very different. They don't serve it in bottles or anything there. It's little tiny glasses like this high.
Real skinny.
Yeah, real skinny. And they have a tray of them, and they just go around. You want another one? You know, you want another one? You know. Unfortunately, if you're an American, you don't realize every time they put down another one, they charge you for another one. You know?
Is it very cold or the glass is cold?
It's not. It's not room temperature, but it's not cold either. But it doesn't taste bad, believe me.
But the beer is so much better.
It
It
is.
doesn't need to be.
It's unfiltered and it's just, it tastes good. The other thing is, if you ever get to Germany, look at the cup, okay? And you'll see on every cup in Germany, you'll see a line,
Yeah.
okay? If the beer, when the foam goes down, if the beer doesn't come up to the line, they're in violation of the law.
They owe you some more, huh?
And we did that one time when we were in a restaurant, and one of the people said, "Oh, look at my beer didn't come up." Immediately they brought a whole nother round, no charge,
Oh, wow.
because it's against the law. Because what they do is I guess years ago, is they put a big head on it, you know, and you get half a cup, you know. So now there's all sorts of laws for beer in Germany.
We're heading
Yeah.
in their direction. We're opening more and more local places.
Yeah.
Like 100 years ago, we're
Yeah,
going back
well,
where we came from.
If St. Arnold's just came out with a new beer, and I know that I'm not going to be able to get it because it's limited, but if anybody gets some of it, I want you to bring me a bottle.
I
okay?
can probably
What's
get
the
it
name?
for you.
Can you? I don't know the name of it, but it's a wheat beer that's unfiltered.
Okay, well,
Is
if
that
you
the
can
Astro
find,
beer?
The
No,
Katie
it's just
Rotary doesn't
coming
do
out
beer
like-
unless they can get anything.
yeah, I can get you it if you can get me the name.
Okay, it sent out an email, and I saw it, and
I'll
have
give
to
you
check
my
it.
email address and you
Okay.
can forward me the email.
Okay.
I'll work on that for you.
Okay, good. All right. Let's go back to.
Sorry.
No.
And then we're gonna have a party away from
Yeah, no, I'm a party, yeah. Forget it. It's my beer.
and the gallows that they set up for the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring your
Yeah.
own.
Let's see, what verse am I on, guys?
Bring your
Nine.
own.
Okay. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Okay? Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. You know, pride goes before the fall.
Right.
And look at the whole thing. All he's thinking about is getting revenge.
Right,
yeah.
And what happens when we seek revenge? It often comes back on us.
Yeah.
In many ways. Even if we don't get the revenge we think we want, all that plotting eats us up. He's not a happy man. This to me is not somebody who's happy. He's not content. You know? All these things he has brought no contentment. Then his wife and all his friends said to him, have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. That'll make you happy. Get rid of him. 75 feet tall. We don't know if that, Jewish people use numbers as symbolic. 75 wouldn't really have any symbolism. We wonder, some scholars think that maybe it was built on top. If he was the official, he probably lived in the palace area, and there was a tower, and they might have built the gallows up on top of the tower. So the gallows weren't 75 feet high,
Right.
okay? It was on top of this, what do you, the turret?
Yeah, turret.
A turret like, you know, and then, you know, so everybody could see
Yeah, so it
him
can be
being
seen everywhere,
hanged.
in other
It could be
words.
seen everywhere, in other words, yeah, yeah. And that makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than, it would take you forever to build
Yeah, I was gonna say, that you could.
75 feet high, you know, 7 stories high. Okay, man, what verse again?
This is,
6. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign. This was not unusual to have the kings have somebody write down everything they did, okay? And it usually was in very flowery prose, you know, how great they were and all the great things they did.
Libraries.
As far as I know, this is not in existence, these chronicles any longer,
Okay.
for this time period, okay? To be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed the two jailers, 2 of the king's officials who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate the king. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman, who had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on his head. Those were considered very fine things to do. Okay? Not just a new royal robe, but one that the king himself has worn, and a horse he's ridden. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city gates, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Oh, wow. Can you see the twist coming?
Yeah.
Holding his head in his hand.
Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do as you have suggested for Mordecai. What? My mortal enemy, you know. And anybody watch The Big Bang?
Yes.
Yes.
Sheldon has a list with his mortal enemies on it. You know, this is number 1 of my mortal enemies, you know. Who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended.
Do it all.
I gotta take this guy through the town, you know. My worst enemy. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He rode to Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Now, have you, I don't know if they're doing this still, but you go into Walmart and there's the greeter at the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do they greet you?
Good morning, can I get you a basket?
Yeah. Good morning, welcome to Walmart. You know, can I get your basket? You know, usually, this is going to be very prejudiced, okay? But usually, the older guys, they're so nice and friendly and they're talking with everybody. A while ago, I got some young lady and she said, welcome to Walmart, what can I do for you?
Or they're talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought, are you really happy that I'm here? Yeah, Grace?
Most times I go, they don't say anything old or young.
Oh, yeah, really? Yeah.
Because are you on a mission when you're walking in there? Are you like, because I know when I'm like, I'm really doing something they don't. But if I'm kind of just like walking, then they'll say, oh,
You know,
hi.
what's the good of a greeter that's not really into it, you know? And the only reason I'm sharing that with you is I can imagine the way that he went around
Yeah.
is, wait a minute, what verse?
Oh, how he was talking to the
Well, they were still, okay. Afterwards more, okay.
This is what is done for the
Oh,
man.
yeah, can't you just hear how he says it? This is what is done to the man the king delights to honor. Honor Mordecai, you know? Yeah, I can just see it, can't you? Yeah. Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Woe is me, I'm a victim. His advisors and his wife said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they are still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, okay, the king again asked Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, O king, and it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition.
What are you talking about, Esther?
Yeah. And spare my people. This is my request. What? Can't you just see the king going, what? What are you talking about? For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. Because Haman was willing to pay for it, they were sold into slavery. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet. Because no such distress would justly disturbing the king. This is more than just we're being put into slavery, we're being killed. Again, she knows how to work him, yeah. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Okay, he still doesn't realize what he had signed. Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. Oh, you think you had a bad morning, Haman? Oh boy. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wife. You can see, you know what's going on here.
He wasn't thinking.
Yeah, and went out into the palace garden. He had to cool off. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. I love this. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. He's going over to plead for his life. He has too much to drink. He trips and falls on the queen. As the king is walking in, Yeah. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in my house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. The same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman. So she got a royal palace out of it, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told him how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. The signet ring allowed them to make any laws they wanted to.
Okay, so they're like the number two to the king.
Number two to the king, yes.
Okay.
But unless you anger the king, you can do just about anything you want. You have the royal seal.
Yeah.
You know, you can put that on anything, you know. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. So Mordecai now is running all of Esther's estates. He has all this money coming in. He's second to the king. But there's still a problem. Dun, dun, dun. yeah. I'd love to make a movie about this. I can't get into this. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jew. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it's the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I dare to see disaster fall on my people? How can I dare to see the destruction of my family? Then King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jews, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best for you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his king can be revoked. So the order that went out for Haman, that on this certain day the Jews could be killed and plundered, has to stand. And that was Persian law of the day. Okay? So now, what are you going to do? He can't retract the law. So he says, okay, Mordecai, you're second in command. Take care of this problem for me. You write a law.
You figure out the loophole.
So what's going to be the loophole?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, this is where we cut to the commercial. Yeah, okay. At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the 7th month, the month of Shivan, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces, stretching from India to Cush, this huge area. Okay. Cush is the upper Nile region. So Egypt, I think, still is kind of sovereign, but even that upper area, which the Jews eventually are going to be settling in, okay, that is all under this control. Okay? Or, I'm sorry, eventually, I said that wrong. This is after they settle the Nile area. Okay, and then they come back up into the Holy Land, and then they're taken over. But that whole fertile valley there is all taken over by King Xerxes. Okay? These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, because he has now the royal seal. Okay? Sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. So get the best horses, and we're going to have a Pony Express.
Get it out.
You know, the Pony Express, you know, only lasted for a very short time period in the West. But they would ride a horse, you know, and jump off and jump onto a new horse and take off, you know. So they got to get these dispatches out as quickly as possible. What are these dispatches going to say? The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves. Okay, so on this certain day, everybody has a right to attack the Jews, but the Jews can defend themselves. They can take up arms. Okay? to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. Okay? So if you have a Jew if you have a Gentile, a Persian living next door to you, and you try to take them over, they can kill you and take your property. Okay?
This
Take
does
that
sound like a
and
movie.
one more for this.
What?
Yeah, take that and one more for
Yeah.
your.
Yeah. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the same day
Yeah.
of Purim, the casting of the lots. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and be known to the people of every nationality, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. That's the royal city where they're at. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. All those things were considered royal colors because they were very hard to dye. Okay? Purple, the reason purple was considered a royal color, I read this one time historically, is the purple color for the kings came by crushing snails that were along the coast of modern-day Yemen. Okay? But the purple workers kept it a secret. They didn't tell anybody how they got it, so they had inflated prices. Okay? That's how they...
Secret formula.
Yeah, the secret formula. Yeah, yeah. That wouldn't happen today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know the family De Beers?
They're diamonds?
Diamonds.
Uh-huh.
They have a monopoly on all the diamonds.
Sure they do.
And they inflate the prices.
Right.
And they're the ones who do all the advertising that diamonds is
Are
for
forever.
a wedding.
Yeah.
Because that was not popular up until our century. You know, and we'll keep the prices up. Right? That's the same thing they were doing. Now, there was another reason for blue, and I was trying to think, I want to say the blue came from the shell of the, I'm going to say this one, lapsa. It was like a scallop shell, and inside,
Lapis lazuli.
yes, that's it,
Lapis
lapis. What's this?
Lapis lazuli, I think is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And the reason I read that, believe it or not, I know I'm off the subject, I'm sorry. They have discovered a skeleton in a nunnery where it was embedded in the jaw of this nun. And they said that the reason was they were hand copying the Bible in those days, and they would put in pictures and stuff, and that blue color they would put in the brush, and in order to get real fine, they would take the brush and put it in their mouth and twirl it. And they said they always thought, and now they're changing their thinking, archaeologists, that these manuscripts were produced with the monks in the monasteries. But now they're seeing that there are some nuns who are producing these manuscripts in their nunneries. Okay? And that's the way they did it. And it was the lapsus. Yeah. I can't...
See you next week.
Yeah, we're at the end of our time. Can we go one more week?
I hope so.
Okay, before we go, okay, I have to do this before we go because they're not going to be here next week, okay? One of the things we're going to talk about is how they celebrate it today. And they have pastries called hamatash, Haman's ears. Yes, and they think it comes from the hat that Hamish wore, okay? This is the cookies, Hamantash, Haman's ears, okay? And they're three-sided, and then they put some fruit in them, okay? I would have gladly bought some for the whole class, except these cost more than the lobster and steak at the grocery store.
They're out of season right now, aren't they?
I guess they're out of
That's
season.
why.
Yeah, it was the new Sprouts, it was just opening.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is not Purim season, but I guess some people still want
You
them.
can get huge ones for 99 cents at most of the Jewish bakeries.
Yes,
Bracelet.
later on,
Yeah.
not now. Okay, but that's Haman's ears, okay?
May
Hamantash.
I take a moment to pray? Frank, thank you so much for your casserole. It was wonderful.
Yes,
Very
it
good.
was.
I think there's still some left.
I haven't gotten it. I'm going to take a piece and put it in my office. I'll take it home with me for lunch, okay? Okay, let's close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that you pour out on us each and every day, especially for your word. We can see how the Old Testament, the New Testament, is really the scriptures in its entirety, and how Jesus was fulfilling each and every one of these festivals as he celebrated them. And we thank and praise you for that. And may it open our hearts and minds to do your will at just the right time. We ask this in the most precious name of Jesus. Amen.
You need a bottle of
Receive the
water?
benediction of our Lord. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.
Amen.